In this week's episode of Get Real with Gab, I'm speaking with Sean Flakelar. Sean is the owner of SF Consulting, a boutique consulting firm in the hospitality space. Before COVID, Sean was managing luxury hotels across the globe. But when COVID hit and a change in circumstances prevailed, Sean decided to start his own consulting firm. This is a really great episode for anyone who is deciding to transition out of employment into a lifestyle business. I won't reveal too much, but we discuss some of the challenges and how working together provided Sean with the tools he needed to position him and his business in the luxury hotel space. I hope you enjoy this episode of Get Real with Gab. Don't forget to connect, subscribe, and share. Hi, Sean.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, really well. I'm in Sydney this morning. It's the harbour here, and it's a bit of a grey morning, but looks beautiful all the same. How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm currently in Canada, so hence why everything's a little bit remote at the moment, which is fine. But I
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming on Get Real with Gab. So I'm not sure if you've actually seen the podcast, basically where the premise of the podcast is to interview business owners like yourself
Mm-hmm.
around your experience, what you've learnt, and I guess, how things are going for you as well, because I know you've had like a massive transition in the last 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess for our listeners out there, why don't you give us a little bit of a background on, I guess, your career and then why you transitioned into becoming a business owner?
Okay, very good. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast this morning. It's a real pleasure to share a bit of my experience and a little bit of knowledge. Look, for me, I started in the hospitality industry in 1983 as an apprentice chef, and had the fortunate experience to work in some amazing restaurants in Sydney in those early days, which took me to Indonesia to join a very dynamic group in the day called Almond Resorts. And they were basically an Asian-based boutique hotel resort company. And they specialized in the top 5% of the market, which their entry level rates were like in those days around 650 US. And
Wow.
instead of building 400 room hotels, they built 40 room hotels, and their financial and business model was more towards high end hospitality for the 5-star market, but creating more of a personal home style experience where the level of service and just the guest experience was something very new to the industry. This was really spearheaded by a chap called Adrian Zecker. And Adrian had decided to develop his own villa in Phuket in those days, but he didn't have the infrastructure, so he decided to build a resort. Hence was the first almond that was ever built in Phuket called Almond Puri. And it was very clear in those days to Adrian that the market was looking not for such big, sort of hotel impersonal style resorts, but he was looking for something that a bit more special, a bit more where we could create more like a home experience where every guest was treated as family and left as friends. So it was a very different style operation. I
Very
came in
innovative, to be honest, for that
very,
time as well.
very integrative, no signing of bills. Everyone knew the guest's name. It was very specialized. And I, at the time, was a chef in Sydney, and I was invited to join them in 1992 in Bali, and that was our second almond that we opened. I came over as an executive chef, but my love really, apart from the food, was to be into management. So over the years, I worked with Adrian and in different of the almonds, and then I asked him, could he give me an opportunity to go into management? So in 2001 in Central Java, I cut my teeth on my first property called Jiwa, and that was 3 weeks before 9/11 hit.
Oh,
So
wow.
here we are in Central Java in the most beautiful resort in the world overlooking the Borobudur Temple in Central Java. But unfortunately, our American business dried up and we had to really knuckle down and try and get through the next 2 years, because it was a very difficult period for tourism into Indonesia and across the world. I mean, everyone was a bit shocked what happened, but tourism regained slowly in Indonesia. Bali was the first one to rebound, but Java came a bit later. So for the next 10 years, I cut my teeth there and loved it, loved being in as a general manager, and worked for the group over the, up until 2019. So I did 27 years with them. I worked,
Wow. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
It's
as
just
general
so
manager.
unheard of. Yeah.
And I look back fondly of all the different countries we worked in. We did 22 years in Indonesia. We did Java 10 and Bali 12, and then we moved on, and same company went into Vietnam and ran a beautiful almond property in the national park down south of Cam Ranh on the coast there in Vietnam, and that was called Hanoi, and that was very isolated, I guess. It was next to a local fishing village and a little town, but the guest experience was amazing there. The Vietnamese people were fantastic to work with. English was a bit of a challenge in the day,
Mhm.
but we spent a couple of years there and then ended up in Sri Lanka, where we had the fortunate experience to running the Almond Gala, which is in the Dutch fort in Galle. So over 27 years, that really covers a variety of different countries, different properties, different challenges. We went through
Mhm.
an earthquake in Java. We went through a volcanic eruption in Java. We
Wow.
went through, obviously, unfortunately, some terrorist attacks in Colombo in Easter in 2018. So different challenges, different countries, different culturally, different cultures had different challenges. But as a general manager, you tend to wear all different hats. One day you're the disciplinarian, some days you're the dad, and next day you're the mentor, and next day, so it was a very challenging role, but very fulfilling role in terms of, you had ownership of your property. You were very hands-on with the guests. You're very hands-on with the staff. You're immersed in the culture, and that was what was so special about this company called Almond in the day. So that was given me a big leg up in terms of running small boutique hotels. I had left in 2019 and went to Mexico and took on a standalone property called Quixmala, which was owned by the Goldsmith family.
Mhm.
As James Goldsmith in the 80s was one of the richest men in the world, and he acquired land on the Pacific coast north of Manzanillo and turned it into a wildlife sanctuary, but also as a working ranch. And he built some extraordinary villas and resort rooms in the main building, and had a view of the ocean. And it had a variety of there was water birds, there was crocodiles in the creeks, there was 48 zebra. He had heard of
Wow.
48 zebra that he was gifted back in the 80s, who had a friend who had a London zoo, and he shipped two pairs of zebra and two pairs of eland. And over the years, by the time I got there, one of the guest experiences get on the horses with the cowboys and ride through the herd of the zebra.
Oh
So
my
it
God.
was
That would have been
just
amazing.
was amazing
Yeah.
like country, culture, Mexico, beautiful people, great food. But unfortunately, COVID hit and we closed the resort. And I moved back to Australia via England in those days because we couldn't get flights and we had dogs. And so we had to set up base in England for about 14 months while we could get my wife's permanent residency and get the dogs quarantined to get home. So I went home, looked after my mum in 2020 and met a guy who owned a beautiful resort called Kokomo, Lang Walker, who is very well known for the development in all the developments projects that he's done across Australia and internationally. But this was a passion project of Lang's. He was looking for a general manager, and it was one of those things. I stepped, I opened the right door at the right time, and we got on very well. He was in his late 70s, and I'd been around the traps a little bit, so we clicked, and I went over and opened and Kokomo because we had a cyclone a year previous, and then lockdown hit us. Fiji was closed until December 21, so we had time to renovate the resort, get things ready. And December 1, the country opened, we were ready. And for 22, we were full. It was a massive built up demand for Australians to leave at that time.
Yeah, I remember that. And everyone was going close rather than obviously
Yeah,
overseas
Fiji
because, yeah.
it was a bit more easier for a lot of people. So
Mm.
we limped through the first 6 months, still had the COVID protocols, and we had to quarantine guests if they came down with COVID. And so that was a challenge for a while, but then that lifted and, travel opened up, and hence where we are where we are. But I think by the time I got through 2 years on the island, my wife was still in Australia. I decided to return home after 30 odd years of being away. It was time to reconnect with my elderly mum, my family, my son, who I hadn't seen for a long time. And so we decided to move. I moved back and moved to a place in Wollongong with my son. And we said, okay, well, let's see what happens. Let's move back. And for 6 months, I had a good rest after 30 odd years of working in Asia. I was I was ready for a rest. And about a year later, I was ready to get back to work, but I had changed my priority, my lifestyle needs, etc. I wanted to be more at home, but at the same time, I loved hospitality, and so I decided to start up my own consultancy business, which was to work with the high-end luxury market. And I thought I'd have a lot to give because of all the experience I had overseas. I was I was really eager to see where this could take me, and so I did that. I opened up Sean Flakelar Consultancy. Didn't have a clue about really much, except because I'd worked for corporations, small boutique companies, but to go out on your own is a very different thing, as you know. And
Yeah.
so I decided to give it a go. I set up as a sole trader. I got an ABN and started to get the word out, first of all, by word of mouth, emailing. But then I realized I had a lot of sales and marketing and to do and build the brand and connect and get my name out there. And this is where the challenge is for me as someone who was a general manager, who had secretaries and PR people and graphic designers and sales and marketing people to do everything. All of a sudden, I was a one-man band, and this is where I think a lot of us start to realize, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? What do I do next? And luckily, the government at the time was offering some, free professional business consultations, which is how really I got
We
to
met.
meet you. Yeah.
Yep.
And we basically then more and more as I got into it, I realized that there was a lot more that I didn't know. And to be honest, you saved me more than once on a few occasions. I mean, I remember going back and pitching for a fairly serious job, which was up at North Queensland. But even before that, getting my LinkedIn right,
Mm.
developing, getting the profile right, getting the messaging right, starting to build a bit of an awareness in the industry. That was really the first, I think, our connection where it started, to be honest. So it was really building the basics.
Yeah.
In terms of branding, in terms of marketing, in terms of profiling, getting the image right. Everything was starting from scratch. And to be honest, I couldn't have done it without you. It was just an amazing opportunity, but amazing service the government offered, to be honest.
Mm.
When you start off, you don't have a lot of money for this. So this has been a godsend. And then as we got to know each other, I got to know you better and understood what skill set you had. That was just really crucial for me because my skill set is my experience, but it's not so much the marketing, the branding, developing all the components you
Collateral.
need
Yeah, the
to
collateral.
collect the collateral to get out there and get into the marketplace. But one of the things that did help me a lot was just how to present to a board. I remember that
Mm.
I was presenting a report that I'd been asked to do, just the layout, just how that reads, how that presents, what do they really want to know, cutting through a lot of the nitty gritty and getting to the top level stuff, understanding what a board really wants to see. And you were crucial in getting that done. And subsequently, that did land me a very, very important job. I got the job to go up there.
Yay!
Yeah, I got the job.
Congrats.
Yeah, so
Amazing.
that got me
Fantastic. Because
across the
I guess we
line, and
haven't spoken, yeah, since we did
yeah,
all of that. It's been a few months, and I've often
yeah.
been wondering, okay, where are you at? But I thought it's all right. I know we'll speak at some point. Wow. So what was the reaction when you presented it? And I guess like to give some more context, before we even talk about that, um, you know, I guess when you decided to go out on your own, what was your initial kind of, I guess, idea of how this would go for you? Given that obviously in your learnings you've realized that okay, in my managerial job you had a support team. Like,
Mm,
what was that kind of turning point for you to realize, oh gosh, even though I know it's like what my husband says, I may not have an MBA and he's got like all the MBAs and university experience, whereas I've got street smarts, if that makes sense. And so
yeah,
I guess for yourself, you've got the street smarts when it came to running lucrative luxury hotels. What was
yeah.
that turning point where you realized, oh gosh, like I'm not sure of how to navigate this?
When I started, I started it because I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose here.
Of course,
Um,
yeah.
and I knew a lot of people in the industry after being, working in the industry since, well, 1983 for me. I was expecting that I'd pick up the job fairly easily
Mhm.
just through the word of mouth and relationships. But after a couple of months of emailing out and calling and cold calls and things like that, I realized I'm going to need help to get my company out there in the marketplace because yeah, I picked up a couple of jobs word of mouth. I did get on to opening a sports bar up at Port Macquarie. They needed help with their kitchen and I did their menu. And after that, I went up to the golf club and helped with their food costs because it was all oh, Sean's in town, he can help you do that. And
Mhm.
then I thought, oh, this is going to just keep rolling like this. But then everything stopped for about 3 months. And then I thought, no, 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 we're going to need help. We're going to need professional advice.
Mhm.
I don't have my team anymore. I can't keep eagling them. Oh, can you do this for me? So I guess that was the time when I thought, no, I need help. So that's when I reached out
Yeah.
to yourself.
And how has your experience, because I know like as you mentioned, we did a lot around, you know, collateral for you, so collateral
Yeah.
and training. Um, how how has that helped you? Even like, yep, you got your first like really big job, which so proud of you. You put in a lot of effort for that. How
Yeah.
has that kind of helped position you to get other work?
Yeah, I think now that we've been through that process, we were
Mhm.
able to set up those templates, for presentation templates, the Excel the report. It was a very detailed department by department report that format that we built
Mm.
really helped. So for future work, I've now got all the templates that I can just slot in information. That's been super helpful. But since I got Qualia, I've now been given another opportunity through basically that. And now I'm working for Kokomo again as the owner's representative. And that's still on a consultancy basis, but now through Qualia, it led to more work with Kokomo, which has led more work. Other people now, they're friends of mine who are opening a resort in Sri Lanka. They want me now to come on board as an owner's rep for them. So the skill set that I was selling has grown and developed into new fields. And since Qualia, it's really opened the doors. So now I'm got too much work. It feels like there's
Really?
too much work. But yeah, that was basically with the help of yourself and just having the confidence, with what you're presenting, what you're talking about, giving the clients what they really want, what they are looking for. It helped me be a bit, you when you go out and work with different groups, different companies, you've got to sort of adapt to their needs. You've got to give them what they're looking for. So you've got to change. You've got to be open to change. You've got to be quite flexible in this role.
Mhm.
And I always gave them more than what they need. So I always tried to, not meet expectation, but exceed expectation. And that really, I learned that through, running these high-end resorts, was always going that extra mile. And
Mhm.
I've always used that philosophy in anything I do with any client to make sure that they're 100%, because you want to build and you want to keep that client base and you want them to come back with future jobs. And so you don't want to just be building new clients all the time. You want to be nurturing your existing, making sure you're going to get return business out of that client as well.
Mhm.
So if all that falls into place, things do start to take shape, and hence I'm full time now. I'm flat out really.
Wow, that's awesome. And I guess, you know, we're talking about nurturing your clients, and especially through this experience where you're kind of gone from being having a face-to-face relationship with obviously the owners and the staff and all of that to it's almost like a remote I guess position initially unless they bring you on board. How do
Yeah,
you how do you nurture those relationships? Because it's obviously not something now where if you see them every day, you have a chat or you'd be walking the gardens,
yeah,
it's a meet and
like
greet. So how do you
yeah.
do that?
I So with Qualia, they have a fortnightly follow-up. They've got an action plan that I've rolled out for them. So I sit on an hour call with the whole team and
Mhm.
the regional. So I keep that connection by being involved on their weekly or their bi-weekly catch-ups. and making sure that you know, they're rolling out exactly what we had agreed on,
Mhm.
and making sure that they do it so that the client, the owners, get that finished product. And I keep making sure, just monitoring from afar, making sure it's all going through. Every now and again, I'll call the CEO and say, "How you going? This is what I'm up to. Anything you need, I'm always there for you." So it's just a courtesy call sometimes. Maybe it's a follow-up, regular follow-up meetings, just an hour or half an hour here, and just being always able to be available for them to contact you at any time. And I
Mhm.
think they feel that they can pick up the phone and call you just for a quick chat, advice on this or that. It goes a long way. So I think keeping yourself available and being proactive yourself
Yeah.
is the key too.
Wow. And so I wanna chat to you about your experience with the board. Like, I know I've had my board experiences, and I know, when we were going through that journey and looking at a different language to talk with the board. How
Yeah.
have you found that experience, and what have you gained from that experience?
Yeah, presenting to the board it was the first really time I've done that. I have been in a board meeting, but um, this is quite important for the property's future, because the board they hadn't met at the property for 5 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
what we did was an opportunity to really drive some things home. But the way I had to present it there was a lot to cover, and I had to look at it from what they wanted to see. You can't, like you helped me with, you can't present too much. You've got to present it in a way that they relate to.
Mm,
So the language is a bit different. They're very It was very important to highlight what the root causes was, but then what was the proposal and the plan moving forward? What were the timeframes involved for that? What were the metrics that we were going to use to evaluate those actions? What was the bottom line? In most of the cases says, "Okay, Sean, this sounds lovely, but what's it going to cost us?" So,
mhm.
you've got to be able to present, "This is the situation. This is my recommendation. This is the rollout. This is how much it's going to cost." So it was a very different, type. And then having family members, non-family members, board members that have been on the board for 20 years, some had different ideas to others, other family members had. So it was trying to manage that dynamic as well, because they all have their opinion. They all want to see different things. So you've got to be able to have a cross section that appeals to a few members that they relate to. So yeah, there was a lot of discussion. There was a lot of open discussion, but I only had an hour to present quite a lot. And then we took them around. I took them around to the individual areas. This is what we're proposing here. We're going to be doing this. This is going to take this long. We're going to have to bring in some specialists for this. So we did a whole site tour through the rooms, the public areas, everything that I presented in the boardroom. Then I had to, walk them through so they could see it in a more of a practical sense and say, "Oh, I gotcha. Okay, I can see that." Yeah. So that was a very interesting experience for me, to be honest.
Were you nervous?
Yeah, I was nervous. You never know, if you've never met the board before, you're not
Mm.
sure really how they go. But I had a lot of coaching from the CEO, and obviously he knew the board and he knew what they wanted to hear and what they didn't want to hear. So I had the heads up there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you're in that situation, and I guess it's almost a little bit like conflict resolution if you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
you've dealt with
Yeah.
obviously a lot of employees,
Yeah.
and if we look at, say, conflict resolution with employees and obviously with the board, would you say they're the same or different? Do you handle it the same or have you handled it differently?
No, it's differently. If
Mhm,
it's a staff related conflict resolution, it's different.
mhm,
Um, you know, you've got to really look at following the labour laws, and there's structure and there's guidelines and there's, there's there's certain things you can and cannot do. It with the owners, all that's out of the room. Anything's possible. If
mm,
they have the appetite to invest, then as long as they can see the ROI and it makes sense, and if the board members are not in agreement, and sometimes there was a bit of conflict, I just stood back and let them discuss it and let them nut it out. That's really what that meeting is all about, to express their views. And, and if they don't agree, they can have that platform to express it. But I wasn't there to tell them what to do. I was there
mhm.
as a professional, selling a proposal that I felt was needed for the future of their property. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just want to talk about employee conflict resolution because I know, like, a lot of businesses out there, they may have one or two employees, some even more. Because you've dealt with employees on a bigger scale and you've dealt with multi-million dollar properties and people who are spending more than say the average person going to I guess a different level or different start resort. How did you deal with conflict resolution with your employees? Like, even though, like, obviously there's rules and regulations and were very successful in your career, what do you think that key thing was when it came to I guess conflict?
I think it was, it's a great help if you have a really good human resources manager.
Mhm,
A lot of the countries I worked in were Asian countries. Obviously, you're a visitor of that country. You have to respect that you have to remind yourself you are a visitor. However, you are in charge and you are there to make sure that the business is run correctly and we're maximizing our bottom line, looking after guests, but also looking after the staff. But if there was an issue, I would try to just look at what is the issue here? What actually is the cause? What has caused this? And how can we prevent it again? And always looked at individuals as individuals. Staff members were always individuals, but based it on fact, based it on the resort handbook. We
mhm,
had a CLA. We always worked pretty closely with manpower if we had to lean on them to help us with any cases that we couldn't resolve internally. But I always leaned on my human resources. I got good advice, worked with the management team, listened to the staff. Of course, there's two sides to everything, but then would make a valued decision based on what is the offence, what is the handbook saying here, because you can't judge, or you can't do one for one stuff and not for the other. So you've got to be consistent
mhm.
in everything you do. I would try and be as consistent. I would try and be as fair, but I would also try to look at the causes and make sure whatever happened, if we had to let a staff go for a certain reason, that we learn from it and we put steps in to avoid that, happening again.
Yeah.
So it takes time, it takes experience, it takes a little bit of, understanding where you are, what culture you're in, what is important to the staff, what isn't important. what are the labor laws there? Leaning on your team, what would they suggest? You've got to cut through a little bit of bullshit here and there, and
Yeah.
then come up with a valid decision. Sometimes I'd have to take it to head office and explain, and they would look at it and they would advise sometimes. But most of the time, we could manage that just through proper dialogue, proper communication, following the rules, and being human at the same time. Sometimes we found that the staff, maybe their husband or wife is very ill and they're not getting much rest and they're not concentrating. You've got to really look at the person and understand the situation and come up with a fair but value judgment.
Yeah. Awesome. And so leadership is, such an important thing in any business. So whether you're running, multi-million dollar businesses like you did, or, even now that you're running your own business and you may or may not employ someone in the near future, how do you build leadership within an organization?
I think leadership comes with consistency.
Mhm.
Leadership comes by leading by example. Um, Leadership comes with a lot of integrity, comes with a lot of responsibility. A good leader is a good listener.
Mhm.
Uh, he listens, he watches, yeah, as I said, he leads by example. He walks the talk. He doesn't, do something, says something, and do something completely different. So there's consistency. It takes time to build trust with your team. But as soon as you do that, they can see that you're there for them. You're there for the business. You're got a lot to offer. You can make a difference to their lives, to the business. Then they start to respond. But as soon as you start to waver or double standard or start favoritism, certain bosses or leaders favorite certain groups or certain people. You got to try and avoid that. You got to lead fairly consistently and be, open and honest, but also be consistent. And I wouldn't, it's hard not to, but sometimes avoid having favorites because it can create jealousy within the team too.
Yeah, for sure. And so there's a lot of, I guess, people who are transitioning out of their working career into
Mm,
owning a small business, or, a solopreneur like you've done. They've had their children, they've had their career, and now they're transitioning into what I call a lifestyle business.
mm.
What are some of the key things you would, if someone was doing that and they asked for your advice, what's some of the advice you would give them if they're thinking about transitioning into something for themselves?
Look, I think don't hesitate. I
Mhm.
probably should have done this years ago. I think if you feel that you've got a product or a service or a skill that is valuable and that you can market it and it's something that you can generate revenue from, even though maybe you haven't done it before, but there's a passion there, there's an interest there. You've got to go with your gut feel sometimes. And I strongly recommend to go with your gut feel, because at the end of the day, you can only try. You can only, if you fail, you get up and you try again. You can only try these things, and don't be scared to fail and go with your gut feel. I mean, I was lucky enough that I had some savings. I could sort of fall back a little bit. We had to tighten the belt. We had to, we didn't know where the next check was coming from. So there's a bit of a risk. You got to be able to take risks. You
Mhm.
got to say, okay, I've got to cut the umbilical cord from working with corporate companies and just go take the risk, believe in yourself, go with your gut feel, and don't be afraid to fail.
Was there ever a point when you did start where you had a bit of a "Oh shit" moment, "What am I doing?"
Yeah, for sure, I did, and
Yeah.
especially as the bills were mounting up and there was no work there, and there were offers to go back as a general manager several times, which was I could have gone back and done that, but I felt, hang on a minute, what's going to get me out of bed and excited every day? And I thought about it, and I thought, no, let's stick at this, and let's try and make this work. I said I'd give myself another 6 months, and if it didn't work, well, I've got a backup to go back and being a general manager. But luckily, Qualia happened thanks to you, and I didn't have to do that.
So, I guess and look, I know for myself, some days, being, a business owner and, you're the only person in your business for a period of time. How did you keep motivated, and what did you do? What was your average work day? Because again, when things were slow, what did you do to keep progressing forward because you had such a strong belief, and kudos to you for having that belief. And I think it's something that's super important in anyone embarking on a journey to do something for themselves. You have to have that 110, 150% belief, otherwise you just won't get out of bed. But when you got up of a morning when things were quiet, what did you do on a daily basis to keep moving forward?
Well, first of all, I'd always go and get up early and go for a swim or a walk, or you know, get yourself going in the right frame. Surround yourself with nature, get yourself healthy, get your sleep in. Start to, because I was quite exhausted after 30 years of grind, and I needed to reboot. And once I
Mhm,
rebooted my energy, I was ready to take on this challenge. And you have to be quite willing to try things that you've never done before. So one of the things and you again helped me with this, was I reached out to the universities and ended up being a guest lecturer for the College for Blue Mountains, for their hospitality graduates. And, by doing that, just something simple, a PR exercise like that, that gave me so much confidence, and that put a lot of likes on my LinkedIn. And that started to build the profile. So I guess when you're starting out, you have to really stretch yourself, look out of the box, look out, how am I going to get my brand for for what I was doing. And I thought, you know what, the best way salespeople work is just by sometimes offering something for free, and
mhm.
offering advice for free, and going on LinkedIn and saying, have you thought about your food costs? Well, maybe you need to start looking and so it attracts people's attention. So
Mhm.
sometimes you've got to give before you get back.
Yeah.
And that was my thinking towards going, and Torrens University, sorry, it's affiliated with the Blue Mountains. But I went in and yeah, I was a guest speaker on guest experience. So the first year students, a lot of them were Asian. We had an hour and a half, and I went through what is a guest and how do you develop a guest experience and why is it so important. And I remember you helping me with that presentation, and I walked out of there so elated. And you know what? I think about a week later, I got a call to go and meet the CEO for Qualia.
Oh my
And I
god.
know it wasn't because of that, but the energy, and you start to attract, if what you're giving out,
Manifest.
the energy comes, you start to manifest things, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
as soon as you start manifesting and you can see this is giving back, who knows what that might bring back to me.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not all about, charging and selling and hard. It's sometimes you've got to go in there and offer your services and show them what you can do. And then they might go, hey, you know what? I could use with a guy or a girl like that.
Yeah. And so one of the other things I wanted to talk about, and so many people struggle with this, and I want to ask if you actually struggled with this. How
Mm.
did you value your time in terms of a dollar figure? And obviously, we don't have to talk dollar figures, but I when I talk to a lot of those small businesses, it's like, oh well, I don't want to charge too much. What if I'm too expensive? Like,
Yeah.
because you've worked in a very luxurious space, when you were working out what your value is worth, did you hesitate with the numbers, or did you know, yes, I know I can actually charge X for my service?
Yeah, this was probably the most challenging part
Mhm.
of the business is actually putting that value, that dollar value, into a daily rate or an hourly rate or a monthly or whatever it is. But I think what I did, I spoke to a lot of different consultants. I got advice on how they charge, to be honest.
Mhm.
Um, I talked to other hospitality consultants and got a bit of a range from them. But I sort of judged it on what my daily fee was,
Mhm.
based on what I was earning as a general manager. I sort of went back to that and said, well, what was I earning before? Let's break down this into what would a daily rate look like if I was, what I was charging for my other ex companies. And that gave me a bit of a ballpark. Then I
Mhm.
looked at market and I looked at clients individually. But as I was starting, I was quite cheap. I'll tell you how cheap I was. And I'm not charging this anymore, but I was charging like $300 a day.
Oh my
And
God. Wow, I was
yeah,
thought you were gonna say $300 an hour. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's about," you
yeah.
know?
So I
Wow,
came
yeah.
in super low, and this was up at Port Macquarie. They didn't have a lot of money, but I was so keen to get going.
Mm,
I was sort of undercharging myself, but it got me work and it got me
yeah,
going. And then as I built up, then I charged more. And depending on the client, they took it or they didn't. But once I felt that I was, getting a bit more experience, I was starting to read the room better, the client better. Now I have a daily rate that I'll charge anyone now. So I've established that
mhm,
I feel that is value for me and for them. Because if you're going too low, they start to think you're not, well, you mustn't be that good,
yeah,
if you go in too low. But you can't go in too high either, that you don't get the work. So it's a bit of research, it's a bit of market survey, it's a bit of talking, it's a bit of looking at what are your costs, what's your expenses a month, what do you really need to generate, so you're making
mm,
sure you can make this work. Because if you're not covering at least your costs for the month, then you got to really think hard what you're going to do. So yeah, you've got to look at your situation a bit to come to that sort of final figure.
yeah,
No
yeah, for
sort of
sure.
hard and fast formula, but eventually you get there as you go and get more jobs. And it's great when you get that big check, because I look back and I'm making more money I am now and working half the time. So it's you
Yeah.
know the rewards take time, but they can be out there. And for the right consultants, I think it's a great opportunity for people.
Yeah. And so you would have, obviously had your first year budget of what you wanted to earn in your first
Yeah,
year out.
yeah.
Okay. And obviously, looking at your projection of work you wanted to get, how has that differed? So you've done your budget, you've gone, okay, if I make X for my first 12 months, fantastic. How has that experience been? And obviously, you have surpassed it, or you're about to surpass it.
Yeah.
Um, Talk to me about that. Like, how did you come up with the figure of what you wanted to make? And
Well,
how,
actually, I had a tutorial with Kurt. Sayer
Yep.
Roberts, who's a part of the same business, New
Mm.
South Wales, and he provided a different service in bookkeeping. He told me how to work on, invoicing, obviously, reconciliation through Xero, because
Mm.
accounting is a really, the quicker you can build your account base and your programs, because you have to now manage your tax and what does
Yeah.
that mean? So you're paying GST quarterly, all of a sudden there's all these things. So I was given a great start in knowing how to work with Xero. Is just one of the software. There's many others, but I went with that. And Kurt helped me set that up from the beginning. So we worked out a bit of a budget target to see what it would mean to cover that yearly budget.
Yeah.
The first year we didn't. We ran a loss. The second year we made money. So
Yeah.
I'm now into the third year. I'll probably continue that to grow now. But yeah, the first 12 months we made a little bit, but the next year we did make money. So it took
Yeah.
me really 2 years to get there.
Which is about average. Like the first 2 to 5 years, it's always
Yeah,
kind of the toughest years. So
yeah,
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 amazing,
yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
And so I guess like for, people that are transitioning their careers, what is some of the advice you would give them? If they're sitting on the fence, or maybe they've had a bit of a side hustle that they're thinking, you know what, I think I want to do this full time. Or I have this idea and I want to start at some point. What's some of the advice you would give them, having gone through a whole transition, and you've almost like metamorphed into something completely different to what you thought your journey was going to be, in
Yeah,
terms of experience and all of that? What would you say to
yeah.
people who are in your position at the moment?
Look, I think first of all, if this is a passion and this is something you really love and you want to give it a go, even though maybe you haven't, it's having the confidence to go and do it. You got to be a risk taker at some point in time, and you got to minimize your risk if you do your market research. But what I would suggest is I'm a sort of if I don't know something, I got to find the right people, and find out so I do know it.
Hmm.
And a big part of this in setting up your business is there's a lot of areas you don't know. There's a lot of, we all have our own skill sets, but then there's other skill sets you need that you may not have. So I think the way I've managed through my whole career, if I don't know something, I'll reach out to someone who knows and get them to help me so I do know it.
Hmm.
Because as soon as you can't expect to know everything, so you've got to be open to find the right. Don't be afraid to ask for help,
Mm.
is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because I asked for help and it was the best thing that I did. If I hadn't gone to ring up, the business, New South Wales Business Council, I would have, I don't know how I would have went. So I've had that approach all through my career. I was a chef. I was elevated to general manager. There was a hell of a lot of things I didn't know. I would call up the general manager and say, how do you do this, mate? And can you help me with this? And if you're open to that, and you're that sort of type of person to admit, look, I don't know how to do something, get on the phone or email and find the right people to help you. And you'll start to build momentum. Things will start to make sense. You'll start to see other areas. Oh, I didn't think of that. Who can help me with that? And you'll just keep going, and gradually you'll get there.
Hmm. Amazing. And I guess one last question I have for you. So, with your career, if you looked back on your 18-year-old self or 16-year-old self, and if hospitality wasn't the industry,
Mm.
what other industry would you have gone into, or what other job role would you have gone into? Have you ever thought about if you did have a different career, what it would be?
I always loved working outdoors. I loved landscaping. I love horticulture. I loved, um, we grew up on the land. I probably would have got into some type of landscaping design
Mhm.
or something more like that. Working with nature, plants, and design, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think you would have owned a business or worked for someone else?
Yeah, I probably eventually. But in what I've tended to, I'm lucky that I've worked with really good chefs, really good hoteliers, really good mentors that gave me that educated me, got me into great places, got me into the right, the right properties. Um, yeah, I think for me, um, yeah, I was, I think, very fortunate in that regard. But look, I think hospitality for me, I loved it because I love people. And you've got to love people if you want to be in hospitality. If you want to be a general manager, you've got people in your face all day,
Mhm.
whether it's a guest or it's a staff or it's corporate office. But for me, what drew me, I love the buzz of the kitchen. I love the service hype. I love me going out and guests. Sometimes you didn't make them happy, but a lot of the time it was great meeting new people and sharing their experiences with you and making people happy. Because, at the end of the day, we're there to create these wonderful experiences to make people happy, and hopefully they come back to your restaurant or your hotel.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Sean, I want to thank you for joining Get Real with Gab. Did you want to do a little bit of a plug for your business?
Look, Sean Flakelar Consultancy. Look, I've been a part of some amazing resorts across the Asia, mainly Mexico and now Fiji over the last 30 years. I love cooking. I love the hospitality. I love seeing a great resort work well with a great team and look after guests. So what entails to make that a success, I've been a part of it. So I can assist in all types of areas of operation, whether it's helping with menus or coming up with a new guest experience or presenting to a board, or just coming in to review the whole operation and give you an audit report to see how we could generate better bottom lines or efficiency or whatever the needs are of the client. So, yeah, I mainly specialize in boutique hotels, not so much in big city hotels, but across the board, my specialty is the running of beautiful five-star high-end properties. So happy to assist in any way I can in either the kitchen or in the front or the back. I've covered most of all those departments. So yeah, always available. Happy to help.
Awesome. Wow. Well, thanks, Sean, for today. Oh my God, I'm so happy that you actually got that job. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah, great. It was a really big
Wow.
effort. Thank you. You're
Oh,
a big
you
part of
did.
that success.
Yeah, but I mean, you did the work. I just kind of gave you a few tools and, you
Yeah.
just ran with it. So, wow. So, what else is on the horizon then?
Oh, I've got quite a lot to do. I'm now reporting to the board for Kokomo, reporting to the family directly. So I'm now, as a consultancy, I'm an owner's representation for the
Yeah.
for the family on Kokomo. So yeah, that keeps me involved in the operation and overseeing new projects, presenting budgets, any new capex that the family want. I represent them on. So yeah, it's become quite a interesting role.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you need help with resources, let me know. I don't know if you've heard, you may have got my email that the government's actually
Yes.
cutting.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry
So,
to hear that. Yeah.
look, they're trying to get them to overturn it. to be honest, it wasn't so much of a surprise for me because when the Labor government was, promising all these things before the election, my warning signs were, okay, how are they going to pay for all this? Services will have to go. I wonder what services that's going to be,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Or the
yeah,
budgets
yeah,
for those services. But I guess, I always look at this, well, there's always opportunity in things like this when one door closes. And so I guess, with my own business, it's looking at for, businesses like yourself, well, okay, how do we support these businesses moving forward, if you know what I mean? So, I am looking at that, looking at how I can do that for businesses and a resource, because I do offer, obviously, like I've helped you, resources to
yeah,
help in certain
yeah. No,
ways.
it's so
So
valuable. I mean, yeah, I'm lucky that I had that opportunity, and I hope they overturn it, because it's an amazing resource, and God, it just saved me big time. So I'm sure it will help people out there in the future.
yeah. So yeah, but with everything, you've got to have a contingency plan. So that's what I'm looking at, is a
Yeah,
contingency plan, and
yeah,
looking at providing fractional services, whether or not that's doing like what I did for you, or reporting, or teaching people, how to use technology, or, if there's projects, being a part of those projects, because it's a one-off low cost kind of fee rather than employing people
yeah,
and things like that. So, if you are looking at, things like that, I can be a resource for you in that sense. We could always
yeah,
discuss
yeah.
terms and stuff. So,
Look,
because you're
I'm
obviously
sure
growing.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be in touch, and
Mm.
I appreciate everything you've done for me and for
Oh, no.
I say hundreds of people with this great service, and hopefully it does survive, and it
Yeah,
lives
I
on.
hope so too. Yeah, absolutely. But kudos to you, man. I'm so proud of you for, like, kicking butt, and now you've got more work coming in, and I'm glad you're
Yeah,
busy.
yeah, we're
You know,
busy. We're really busy. Yeah, I might
yeah,
have to
yeah.
put someone on soon. Yeah, yeah. So
That's oh, that's, you know what? That's a great problem to have.
yeah, 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 it is. Yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah.
great to
Well
talk, Gabrielle.
done.
Thank you for the
No,
opportunity.
Don, fantastic. You have a fantastic day. I appreciate your time. Super proud that you're moving forward and kicking goals. Well done to you.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it. And good luck with everything else.
Yep.
Great to have this opportunity to be on the podcast. Okay.
Awesome.
Take
You
care,
take
Gab.
care.
Bye,
Bye.
love. Bye.